And I'm pulling up Facebook too.
Officer Corey Galloway's body cam. He was grazed by a bullet just minutes after arriving at the scene. His partner, rookie officer Nicholas Wilt, was...
Right, she should be on right now.
Pastor Johnson?
Good morning.
How are you?
I am well. What about you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for asking. Okay. You know what? I need to speak with you about something musical.
3 minutes after arriving,
because I wanted to ask you about some Negro spirituals, like some of your favorites.
Was killed, but not before killing 5 fellow employees.
I'd be very interested in knowing what some of your favorites are.
Residents of Richmond, Indiana, were urged to evacuate after a big industrial fire broke out at the site of a former factory. Clouds
All
of
right,
black
everybody,
smoke,
let's
no
get
injuries
right to
reported.
it. I've got,
Regulators were there to see about air quality.
Pastor
Just
Vicky,
announced a new Biden administration proposal that would
I've been
require
looking, I've been
two-thirds of new vehicles sold in the U.S. to be electric by 2030.
Dennis Blair used to be the head of our intelligence services.
Increases comes out today.
Years ago, about
inflation slowed a little in March.
2007.
Secretary Janet Yellen
That was with
says the U.S.
WVON
economy
then.
is in good shape.
He saw this rising tide of economic inequality.
Although,
he said it would promote social chaos and unrest.
Deaths in the U.S. Now
and I cannot help but feel, and my brother Jonathan said the same thing years ago. He said, with this money getting funded, you're going to see a whole lot of crazy things pop off. And that's what we're seeing. You know, and there is a time between the social inequality in the United States, which is now rising, and now it's rising with white people.
A Mexican immigration agency chief.
And you know, I think when you understand the European dream, and you see Biden over in Ireland today, and what they were escaping, because when you go to Northern Ireland, everybody, you understand the struggle. They identify, in many respects, more closely with the freedom struggle than even black people do in the United States. They know our struggle inside and out, Pastor Vicky. They know it.
Oh, yes.
The murals of Reverend, Angela Davis, Marcus Garvey, that's where the green in our flag came from them. I mean, and the way they break the whole system of colonialism down, and classism, under which racism and all of these other ills fall. Boy, look, girl, there was a guy who's in Parliament. I fell in love with him.
This is 8:20
we were at this, it was a 2-day conference that my father was participating in, and this guy was one of the panelists, and he was one of the keynote speakers. So by the time he was done, I said, Mom, there's my husband.
WCPT 820 weather update.
There he is.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist
I hear you. I said, oh, no. I said, you got one.
Skies, your
I said, there he is.
With a high in the low 80s.
There he is.
Southwest winds increased around 50.
You know, I mean, my mother said, look, one of the things I love about your father is the stuff that he will talk.
By Thursday,
he is unafraid. And you love that. Someone who speaks truth to power.
Saturday, a chance for showers and
thunderstorms. I can live with that.
75 degrees. That's your latest Chicago weather update.
But first, we're going to be talking about Pastor Vicky,
This is a
now Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman from Detroit, Palestinian American, the first Palestinian American to go to Congress, who won John Conyers' seat. She's been doing a fantastic job. They're fantastic job.
Thousands of women from the North
she
and
is
South
pushing for Julian Assange to be released.
Women disguise themselves as men.
And that's very interesting in the wake of, everyone talked about WikiLeaks. All WikiLeaks showed was what the government's doing in our names, and most of us would disagree with it, right?
Even helping to convince the government to create
now these leaks, this big document leak that we just had, do you know, among the other things that it showed was that we have boots on the ground in Ukraine already. And no one's talking about that.
Duties, challenging many men's minds.
In the meantime, President Macron of France said we should not depend upon the dollar. They're joining the BRICS nations.
How do you know if your sump pumps are
So when I was talking about de-dollarization last week, and I'm up on Facebook now,
we know the only way
I'm like, I'm not pulling this out the sky.
Is to test them.
You know, I know too many people from around the world, and I travel too widely. Not to know, I'm like, honey, this de-dollarization is already happening.
The best solution to keep.
Hi, Miss Jackson. Can I get one word from Reverend Vicki Johnson real
Okay,
quick?
Pastor Johnson, can you speak so that we can test your sound?
Activate and test your primary and backup pumps every day and alert you to any problems. We'll also test and alert you.
I need you to turn her off.
Basement temperature and humidity levels, which can help avoid frozen pipes and costly mold issues.
The feed is very loud and is going in and out. She's going in and out. Okay.
All right, I think that sounds better.
Blessed day of April.
At least on my end. How does it sound for you?
2023. It is good to be here.
Fantastic.
It is good to be alive.
Perfect.
But no, she keeps going in and out. What is that?
There's been some like
she goes up, down, up, down.
Where facts matter.
yeah, there's been some like weird, like they're rerouting some of the stuff around here, so I'm not sure if that's.
Well, no.
like,
Is there any remedy that we can have so that so it doesn't sound sketchy on the air?
Yeah. I'm working on it.
Okay,
also,
thank
we
you
have,
so much.
About 3 minutes.
Okay,
Let me check real quick.
fantastic. So, but you know,
Sorry,
no worries. Thank you so much. So it's interesting to see what these documents are already showing, right?
Yeah.
You know, and Americans need to understand what the documents are already showing. They're showing that we have boots on the ground in Ukraine. So, you know, well, we're going to see. No. NATO is the United States with the European face and its military. That's what it is. I ain't mad with nobody. Just tell us the truth so we know what to do. But the fact is, while my kids need food in the United States and adults need food in the United States, people can't make a decent living. People can't buy homes. People cannot rent in the cities in which they live if they have wage jobs. People who make $100,000 a year or more living paycheck to paycheck. I cannot afford to give somebody else money for their war.
Right. It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm like, no, and no, and if y'all are so excited about it, then you get some other countries to do it. The founding fathers told us not to get engaged in these other conflicts overseas. Then I'm not an isolationist. I just know y'all were mighty comfortable with apartheid in South Africa while they were slaughtering black people. Huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Chile.
I'm not saying a word.
Not saying a word. Y'all been comfortable when they were killing Chileans. Oops. Yeah. Mighty comfortable.
That's because people of color don't matter.
Girl, please. And poor white folks either. Because they're willing to let these people take shots at the folks over in Northern Ireland. I mean, come on, y'all. What? If you want to press the British, who hold our money, if you want to press them about getting these people off of the crown, and they pay as much to the British, more to the British, for their independence than Haitians pay to the French.
We got 30 seconds.
Girl, I know why they're real warm over there. And of course, your Uncle Jesse is a son of Ireland, because I think his great grandfather's from over there. So they were over there. Oh, Jesse, you're Irish. He was like, oh, in spirit. They said, oh no, my son. In fact, your great granddaddy. I said, well, now that is true. But
Stand by, we're about to go live.
Wow, America. Boy, this human experience has been a lot, y'all. It's a lot.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, it's Wednesday, April 12th. 2023, getting a little bit of feedback. We're going to work this out. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Oh, the Timberwolves, the play-in tournament. Oh, what a heartbreaker last night. But I'm loving the Timberwolves all the same. And of course, the Bulls will be facing off tonight. So we'll see what's going to happen with these playoffs, everybody. Santita Jackson here. Let's talk about gun violence in America. Is it the guns? Is it us? Is it a combination of the two? And what about the tie between social inequality and rising violence overall? Indeed, there are many studies that point to that as the greater the wealth gap goes in the United States, between the haves and the have-nots. Yeah, is there a racial aspect? Absolutely. But now it's white, too. It's always been white, but now you really see it. That as you see growing economic inequality, look at Kentucky. I mean, this young man had just lost his job. So he felt that his upward ascent into solid middle-class life, let alone something higher, had been cut off. I'm not making excuses for people, but I think we need to find the reasons. That's why I disagree with us not talking about the shooters. I think that is a ruse being pulled upon us by the corporate media. You need to know who's doing what and why. You need to understand, amen, Pastor Johnson, I want to know who you are. I want to know who you are and what your background is. How is it that all these people have military training? Where'd you get it from? And how is it that you get military training not when you're nuts, but when you are entitled and feel that because your life has gone wrong, you can take someone else's? How about that? I'm Santita Jackson. Why don't you call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Got a lot to talk about today as we talk about the gun violence, as we talk about what happened in Kentucky and what's happening all around the country. We have had more mass shootings than we've had days in the year. What are we doing? What are we doing? And then many people with this huge trove of documents that were leaked, letting out our secrets, including the fact that we have boots on the ground in Ukraine. Now people are saying Rashida Tlaib, namely, is leading the effort in Congress to free Julian Assange. What is he guilty of? Letting us know, as Ed Snowden did, what the government's doing in our name. What do you think? What do you think? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. Let's get to some of these headlines before we get to the good news with Pastor Vicki Johnson. In Chicago, it's feeling like spring, everybody. 78 degrees and sunny, but in Minneapolis, St. Paul, in the 80s, 84 degrees and sunny. In the NBA, they are in the play-in tournament season. Who will get to the playoffs? Well, it seems like the Lakers will 108-102 over the Timberwolves in overtime. The Timberwolves only scored 7 points in the last 11 minutes. Oh. And LeBron James just doesn't stop. 30 points, 10 rebounds. Wow, everybody. We're going to see what's going to happen with the Bulls and the Raptors tonight. They are part of the play-in tournament, too. Oh, love it, love it, love it. In the NHL, of course, congratulations to the Boston Bruins, most successful, the winningest hockey team in history. 63 wins. Hey, everybody, but Chicago 5, the Penguins 2, the Jets 3, and the Wild 1. According to these headlines from CNN, the city of Louisville will hold a vigil today to let community members grieve the 5 people killed this week in the bank shooting. And of course, we're thinking about the police officer, not even 2 weeks out of the academy, who was shot in the head, and his partner then took out the gunman. God bless them all. He is in recovery. We're praying for his recovery and the recovery of all others who were impacted by the shooting, including the families of those who lost loved ones. The vigil comes a day after the police released this dramatic police body cam footage, in which authorities say the 25-year-old employee opened fire on his colleagues and then engaged in a shootout with the police before he was killed, everybody. About 2,000 people in eastern Indiana, just across the line from us, on the other side of the state actually, received evacuation orders Tuesday after a large fire at a recycling plant began emitting toxic smoke. The fire, which created a thick black plume over industrial buildings and a neighborhood, is expected to burn for days, and it is said to be definitely toxic, of course, by the Indiana State Fire Marshal Steve Jones. The leaked classified Pentagon documents, what we'll be discussing shortly, posted to social media, suggests that the U.S. is pessimistic that Ukraine can quickly end the war against Russia. The documents highlight specific weaknesses in both Ukraine's weaponry and Russia's military offensive, predicting a stalemate for months to come. And those are just some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. We have got Pastor Vicki Johnson. Pastor Vicki Johnson has not one but 2 congregations now. So proud of her and how her ministry has just flowered. Sending you so much love today. Where can we worship with you on Sunday for the early risers and the people who need to get up a little bit later?
Well, you can worship with us at Lebanon Lutheran Church in Hegwish, 13100 South Manistee at 9 a.m. And then at St. Thomas Lutheran at 80th and Jeffrey Boulevard at 11:30 a.m. for an hour of power. We'd love to have you with us, or you can check us out on Facebook for either church.
Amen to that. Well, what is the good news today? Every day I feel like my head is on the swivel. Something insane is happening. I have to laugh to keep from crying. It's just crazy.
Yes, we do. Well, good morning, Santita, and good morning to all of your morning stars and friends. There is good news. The Hawkins, the first family of gospel music, have left an indelible print in our hearts and minds with soul-stirring gospel music. Edwin Hawkins is the father of contemporary gospel music with the hit, Oh Happy Day. While touring in Europe with Bryant Jones in around 2008, we had done nothing. We were on tour in Europe and sang in 7 countries in Europe. But if we did not close out the show with Oh Happy Day, then we had done nothing. They love that song, and they believe that gospel music is Oh Happy Day. And then Edwin's brother, Walter Hawkins, gave us the Love Alive albums and popularized Going Up Yonder, which is sang at almost every black funeral, and Be Grateful, as well as many other hits. But one that stands out in my mind that he wrote these days is, Thank you, Lord, for all you've done for me. I do thank God for all that God has done for me, but I am concerned about what is going on around me. The opening lyric for that song is, Tragedy is commonplace. Let's stop there. Tragedy is commonplace. Mass shooting at a bank in Kentucky, killing 5 this week, commonplace. Mass shooting in Tennessee at an elementary school, leaving 6 dead last month, commonplace. A teenager shot and killed while sitting in a car as we were preparing for Resurrection Sunday. Shot and killed? Commonplace. A woman shot just yesterday on 71st and Jeffrey in the afternoon while riding on the bus. Commonplace. Access to military weapons. Commonplace. Yes, tragedy is commonplace, but it doesn't have to be. Yes, we should pray for an end to the senseless violence that is commonplace. We should pray as if the solution all depends on God, but then we should get up and work as if the solution all depends on us. We must join in the fight for stricter gun controls. We must stand up and speak out if something is to be done about this tragedy that is commonplace. Tragedy is commonplace, but it does not have to be. Communicate with your legislators about the changes you want to see so that tragedy is no longer commonplace. When we all work together, we can make a difference. Advocate for more mental health services for the community. Request conflict resolution workshops for our children in their schools as they are growing up. Request conflict resolution workshops for adults in our churches and in our social service organizations. We can usher in a society where peace and love are commonplace. It will only happen when we do the work. If we will do this, and I sure hope we will, it will make a difference. And then to me, that's good news.
Amen. 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 Tragedy is commonplace. All kinds of diseases. People are slipping away. The economy's down. People can't see, can't get enough pay. But as for me,
all I can say is
thank you, Lord,
for all
you've done for me. I love you, Pastor Vicki. How can we worship with you on Sunday?
Come on and worship with us at Lebanon Lutheran, 13100 South Manistee at 9 a.m. or St. Thomas Lutheran at 80th and Jeffrey Boulevard at 11:30 a.m. for 1 hour of power.
I love Pastor Vicki Johnson.
Facebook.
Absolutely. Or on Facebook.
I love you, Santita. Yes, I love you.
I love you, love you, love you. Thank you so much for giving us the good news today. Tragedy is commonplace, but it doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be. You need to thank God for everything. You can't cherry pick like the book of James tells us that. You got to take it all, count it all joy. And that's really what it is. That is the good news. We love Pastor Vicki Johnson. Hey, everybody, let's talk with Dr. Shanita Knight, an infection preventionist and registered nurse, college lecturer. She does so much, and she is always trying to give back to the community, too. You know, since they declared the end of the emergency, that is the COVID-19 pandemic, which enabled us to get extra funds personally, institutionally, and now that that's over, even though COVID and all of these other illnesses are still with us, why don't we just pivot and look at some of the other issues that we're facing, health issues, illnesses, strep throat, which I used to get regularly, STDs. These infections are on the rise. What does that say, Dr. Knighton?
Good morning, Santita.
Good morning.
It's a numerous amount of things, to be honest with you. So you missed a lot, you know, like when it comes to the pandemic, like meaning like we've actually let go of a lot. Funding has been cut, resources have been refocused to where we already know, even before the pandemic, public health dollars had already started being taken away from health education programs. Been a challenge as well amongst older adults. So we have to remember that when it came to sexually transmitted infections, this is not something that, let's say, the older era of adults received a lot of education about. When it comes to children, and specifically, it does sound bad, but the highest range is for that 10 to 13-year-old range of sexually transmitted infections when we're talking about children. And that's because the health education mechanisms do not exist inside of schools as they once did. The other piece of it is that while health education, let's say a while ago, used to educate about, let's say, maybe heterosexual relationships, it does not include where trends and things have been going now, as to where there is an increased, let's say, knowledge base around different sorts of relationships that people have. And as a result, the education around those sorts of relationships have, too, not caught up. So when we look up and we say, geez, even since 2021, the increase that has occurred when we talk about STIs is very concerning, because you say to yourself, okay, well, what is it that people are doing? What is it that they should be doing different? And one is really asking themselves, if we're looking at, let's say, one of these infections, whether it is viral, whether it's bacterial, or whether it's a fungus, there sometimes can be long-term consequences. So we might only think about, let's say, like the COVID-19 as having a long-term consequence. But if we all remember, let's say, HPV or human papillovirus, the side effects of that for women was an increased risk of cervical cancer. And I'm talking past term, but these are still, conditions. And for boys or young men, the issue was an increased risk of brain cancer. So we don't think about the unintended consequences when we even think about sexually transmitted infections and what it is that it can do to someone that may encounter them. We know, like, even back in the day, like when it came to syphilis, believe it or not, syphilis is back on the rise, Santita. But back then, we know that if it was left untreated or went unrecognized, then that, too, was something that ended up leading to some sort of neurological issue. When we're walking around with individuals that may not necessarily have health care insurance, don't have resources, people are being faced with job layoffs. While these topics are super, super important, people tend to not get them treated or go see about themselves, and that ends up leading to more damaging effects. And so when I talk about, sexually transmitted infections, and we want to say that prevention is better than treatment, in this case, seeking treatment early is better than doing nothing at all, because it's having damaging effects on the body. This is why also when I've also said, Santita, the importance around having a primary care provider, we also have to be aware of, let's say, our lifestyle habits, and potentially where someone may say, oh, I go and get a checkup once a year, and that is the time that is being recommended. Sometimes you actually need that checkup more than once a year if you live what people call would be a high-risk lifestyle. So I just encourage people that as we are looking at the uptick of sexually transmitted infections, as people may be dating, as we have a population of children that are overexposed to more information that parents, were able to keep their children shielded from because things such as social media and, let's say, the negative messaging that exists in between, let's say, feeds on, let's say, social media. Now it's like you're competing with the internet, and there are exposures there that honestly will pique a level of curiosity in a kid that honestly, I will be honest, I wasn't ready to have some conversations that I've had to have already. But with that, it does mean that these are some of the unintended consequences. So as we continue to see the uptick, I do encourage people to have those conversations, whether that is with a potential partner, whether that is with your children, because some of these things, like once they happen, especially with something going untreated, without something being acknowledged, once that occurs, you cannot turn back. So my encouragement is, yes, while prevention is better than treatment, seeking early treatment for some of these conditions, as well as having conversations, are going to be key, especially considering some people have allergies to some of the treatment options depending on the sexually transmitted infection. So just because the treatment option is there, it may not necessarily be a good one for you. So the goal is as these things are increasing, figuring out ways to make sure that you're protecting yourself to ensure that you are safe.
Everybody, please take care of yourselves. Take care of yourselves. There's more than COVID out here. There's more than COVID out here. But what you must do is really, really take care of yourself. Eat healthfully. Get your exercise. Drink your water. Wash those hands, everybody. Wash those hands. Sending you so much love, Dr. Shanina Knighton. Her handle on social media is Hey, H-E-Y, Dr. Nina, Heydrnina. Reach out to her. You're going to get some of the best information and some of the best, safest advice that's out here. Let's talk with Chip Gibbons of Defending Rights and Dissent, everybody. Let's talk about Julian Assange. Let's get a refresh on what his case means, particularly in light of these leaks that are out here. These leaks, these military leaks that have shown that we actually have boots on the ground. Ooh, yeah, in Ukraine. I mean, you don't really think our soldiers just guard an embassy, do you? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Thank you, Dr. Knighton.
You're welcome, Santita. And it's crazy because we didn't even get a chance to, which we can another time. But I remember it was maybe 2 days ago, he was talking about the potential side effects of, let's say, the morning after pill and the impact on, let's say, maternal health. But they didn't actually came out with a morning after pill, STD pill. Ain't that something?
But let's talk about that tomorrow. We can continue this.
Yeah, no, it's just scary because the thing is when we tend to think it's a treatment for everything, people start getting reckless. Mm-hmm. And that's what's scary because we don't have enough time to test things out and see how they work in our body over time. And if this is something that has the ability to be able to prevent fungus, bacteria, and viruses, we don't think about how that plays into the larger role of antimicrobial resistance. So honestly, Santita, I do think that instead of specifically focusing on this map tomorrow, I would like to touch on antimicrobial resistance.
Okay.
Because we really don't understand the dangers of where we are with resistant organisms and where we're headed if we don't have sufficient treatments with all of the bugs that are turning into super bugs.
Well, just like I said, just send me a little bit of a text. That helps me a lot. And what we can do is continue this discussion because I think you also need to give us a difference, distinguish between a viral infection and a bacterial infection, right? There's a lot that we don't know. So many of us, have viruses and are taking antibiotics, which you shouldn't do, but we don't know. I'm not laughing at anybody. I'm just saying, you don't know what you don't know. And things are not adequately explained. And oftentimes, we don't even know what to ask.
Oh, yeah. Remember how people was thinking that during the pandemic, antibacterial soap was going to kill coronavirus?
Yes.
And I'm like, it's not antibacterial soap that's killing the virus. It's just you washing your hands really good.
That part.
But you're right. Yeah, exactly. So antibacterial is for bacteria. Antiviral is related to a virus. So, yeah, I do think that when we talk about that knowledge base, it's very easy to be an information overload. That some of us may have heard this early on in our training, but sometimes we need that refresher to be able to connect the dots.
Well, we need the refresher and we need the information. Many of us didn't get it the first time. Or it just kind of flies over your head. Because if you walk out of the doctor, if you're walking around feeling well enough from day to day, you don't look into that, right? It's only when you really, really begin to have trouble functioning that things really, really do matter to you. They mean something, should I say, they really mean something very different. And
Ms. Jackson.
Yes.
We have Chip Gibbons on the line, and also we have 60 seconds until we're live on air.
Okay, well, I've got to pivot, Dr. Knighton, but you send me a text and just let me know what you want to continue with tomorrow. Just real quick, because, I would love to do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sweetie.
You're welcome. Have a good show.
You too. Chip Gibbons, how are you?
I'm well. How about you?
Oh, thank you so much for sending me that information yesterday. And what I want you to do, I'm going to ask you to give us a quick refresh on the Julian Assange case.
Sure.
And then put it in the context of these leaks and in the context of the fact that the leaks told us we have boots on the ground in Ukraine. These leaks are really significant. And, it's interesting what the corporate media share with us about the leaks. and what they choose not to share. So I'm really glad that you're here this morning. Always, always, always so glad to have you with us.
Stand by, about to come back.
It's always good to be here. It's always good to be here.
Thank you.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Wednesday, that's October. No, let's not jump ahead of ourselves. April 12th, 2023. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I am Santita Jackson. Meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Hey, Samantha over there, and everybody like and share. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Please, of course, join me on my Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. It's Santita Jackson and Friends. I'm still getting a lot of friend requests on Santita Jackson. I can't take any more, and they're purging people, and that is not my doing. That's what Facebook does after you get a certain number of people. So please go to Santita Jackson and Friends. I have limitless space there, and I want you all to fill it up, fill it up, fill it up. Everybody, let's talk about, we have gotten some news about these leaked documents. We saw, of course, the Pentagon Secretary of Defense saying, wait a minute, these are major leaks, major developments, and you'd be kind of surprised at what's been leaked out, but it's very, very important. It's got our allies very nervous. They're saying, hey, you're not as secure as you think you were. You're not as secure as you once were. And you all are spying on us. That's interesting. And wait a minute, there are boots on the ground in Ukraine. Yeah, that's really, a lot has been revealed. In the meantime, you have Julian Assange, who has been in prison forever, really, because he was confined to an embassy. He's not had freedom of movement for years, for revealing to the American public and to the world what's being done in our name with our tax dollars. So let's talk with Julian Assange. Not Julian Assange. I wish I could. My father got a chance to meet him. But Chip Gibbons, who is the policy director for Defending Rights and Dissent. Let's go back. First of all, let's start with what Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and the squad, if you will, are doing. But then let's go back and talk about Julian Assange and why he's being confined. Chip Gibbons.
Sure. Well, yesterday marked the 4-year anniversary of Julian Assange's arrest. As you pointed out, he's been confined for over a decade, if you consider the time he spent in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And it is worth noting that the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention investigated the situation that was created by a number of governments that led to him to be stuck in the embassy, and they declared that he was a victim of arbitrary detention. So a UN working group considers his time in the embassy to be detention. But 4 years ago yesterday, the British police entered the embassy and arrested Julian Assange. Officially, the pretext where they were arresting him for the misdemeanor charge of bail hopping. He had sought and received asylum in Ecuador, and instead of going to a country that would not agree in compliance with international law not to extradite him to the U.S., he went to the country that granted him, or tried to go to the country that granted him asylum, which is his right under international law, and the U.K. considers that skipping out on bail. But the real reason, of course, was they were bringing this unprecedented indictment against him, 17 counts under the Espionage Act and 1 count of conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. And it's a very grim milestone because he has been in Belmarsh prison, which is the harshest prison in the United Kingdom and one of the worst prisons in the world for 4 years now. Belmarsh was used by Tony Blair to try to detain people indefinitely who were suspected of terror during sort of the darkest days of the war on terror, and it was compared at the time to Guantanamo Bay. It's considered Britain's Guantanamo, and he's there in a medical wing because his health is in incredibly precarious conditions. He's very sick. His family has described what's being done to him as a slow-motion murder, And I've covered the proceedings for Jacobin. They're virtual now post COVID, but when you see him on the link, he looks like someone who is not in good health. I think there's a lot of validity to the claim that we're engaging in a slow motion murder against him. But on this very grim anniversary, you saw this outpouring of support from lawmakers around the world, not just the U.S., but his home country of Australia, where 48 members of both the Australian Parliament and the Australian Senate, that's 40% of their legislators in total, signed a letter asking for the charges to be dropped. Every single political party in the Australian Parliament was represented on that letter. You saw 35 members of the UK House of Commons and the UK House of Lords sending a similar letter to Garland. Once again, you saw a wide range of parties. I mean, most of the people are obviously with the left wing of the Labour Party, but you saw the Liberal Democrats, you saw the Scottish National Party, you saw the Welsh Independence Party, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of my Welsh speaking. It's not very good.
I gotcha.
And you even saw a member of the Green Party and the Conservative Party. And in Mexico, some 95 members of their legislators sent letters, and in Brazil, 99 members of their legislators sent letters. And this isn't the first time some of these groups have done this, but it was the first time that members of Congress in the U.S. joined. We have seen isolated calls from Congress, sort of off-the-cuff remarks about this prosecution, but we've never seen them join together on a letter together, and we've also never seen them send a letter on the same day as people from other countries. That's extremely rare on any issue. So this is a pretty big turning point. The letter was led by Representative Rashida Tlaib, who is being extremely brave right now in doing this, and 6 of her colleagues joined on, including Ilhan Omar, AOC, Cori Bush, Ayanna Pressley,
Jamal Bowman.
Jamal Bowman, mm-hmm. yes, and Jamal Bowman. And I know someone's probably sitting there and saying, wait a moment, the Brazilian Senate had 99 people on their letter, and we only had 7. And as someone who has spent the last 4 years since the arrest trying to talk to people on Capitol Hill and educate them about what's going on, I mean, it's really been an incredible struggle to even get 7 people on this letter.
Why?
There is very real... People in Congress are afraid to speak up on this issue. They are afraid to touch it. They think it will come back to haunt them. They think people in their own party will attack them. And there's a lot of people who wanted to sign this letter but were afraid to do so. So the 7 people who signed this letter, I mean, it shouldn't be, courageous to stand with every single human rights group and every single major newspaper editorial board. But it really is, and they deserve a tremendous amount of credit for doing so. And Tlaib, deserves tremendous credit for leading on this issue. Press freedom groups have been trying to get a letter like this going in Congress for years. And Tlaib, in the last couple months, really stepped up and filled in a leadership void that other progressives who weren't in the squad were just unwilling to fill. So, I hope she doesn't regret it. I hope she's waking up this morning and feeling very good about herself for taking a very courageous stand. Although, as you know, courage isn't always rewarded in Washington, which is why we all need to be talking about how much we appreciate what they've done and what an important step it is. And it's worth, because I've seen some of the pushback that Tlaib has been getting online, it's worth reminding people what this indictment is about. Julian Assange faces 17 counts under the Espionage Act for publishing information between 2010 and 2011, along with the New York Times, along with El País, along with The Guardian, that pertain to the U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. There were 2 sets of documents, one called the Iraq War Logs, one called the Afghan War Logs. They showed unreported civilian casualties. They showed complicity in torture, the usual horrible aspects of war. The Guantanamo detainee assessment briefs, I don't think most people even realize WikiLeaks released those. Those are the briefs where people assess how dangerous a detainee is, and there's no option for Guantanamo, and there was no option for saying they weren't dangerous, right? It was a very Kafka-esque legal process, but it also showed how flawed a lot of these assessments were. And, of course, the State Department cables, which we saw the 10-year anniversary of the release of them. I believe it was earlier this year, not late last year, but last couple months. And the 5 papers that initially released them, El País, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, Le Monde, and the New York Times, all put out a statement calling for the charges against Assange to be dropped, pointing out that they published the same information. So there's a lot of hard feelings still about the 2016 election and what people think WikiLeaks' role in that, or the fact that they published information from the DNC. But none of those allegations, that publishing is part of the indictment. I mean, most people who are very angry that Tlaib has done this are angry about something that has nothing to do with the indictment. And it's very clear that at the end of the day, whatever you think of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and I think they provided a tremendous public service in releasing this information about U.S. foreign policy that allowed newspapers all over the world. I mean, it wasn't just those 5. Those 5 were the first, but you saw The Nation and Haiti Liberté publish a whole series of articles based on these leaked documents about U.S. foreign policy in Haiti. You saw people in Italy publishing stories about policy in Italy and how the U.S. was upset that if a center-left government came to power, they could spend too much money on social spending at the urging of unions and not enough money on NATO. You saw all kinds of things. People all over the world learned things about their own government. And, of course, they revealed corruption in Tunisia that led to protests that, sort of spawned the Arab Spring. So there was a huge public interest in publishing these documents, and the United States is trying to extradite Julian Assange and put him in prison for doing so, which would be an unprecedented move. I mean, we've seen the Espionage Act, unfortunately, in the last 15 years, become really normalized in going after journalist sources, right? The person who gives the journalist the information. But no administration has ever crossed the Rubicon into prosecuting the publisher, prosecuting the journalist. They've certainly considered it. They've thought about it. There are a number of circumstances in which administrations seriously toyed with the idea, but ultimately no one would ever go that far. I mean, Barack Obama had a record number of Espionage Act prosecutions for the sources of journalists, but even he said, we cannot cross the line with the publisher because and it wasn't because he liked WikiLeaks, it was because of what was called the New York Times problem, which is that because what Assange is accused of by the U.S. government is indistinguishable from news-gathering activities that journalists engage in every day, any precedent set against Assange and WikiLeaks for publishing quote-unquote national defense information could be used against the New York Times, the Washington Post. You mentioned right now there's a series of leaks pertaining to U.S. policy in Ukraine. All of the papers are talking about it. I mean, I've read about them in the New York Times. I've read about them in the Guardian and the Washington Post. I mean, using the logic of the Assange indictment, you could put those people in jail for printing it. Now, I don't think the Biden administration is going to do that, but the Espionage Act is an incredibly broadly written law. It was written in 1917. It doesn't use the word classification because the classification system didn't exist then. It predates the modern court rulings on the First Amendment. There was a lot of use of the Espionage Act early on to put people in jail just for opposing World War I, and there was a reaction to that. And as part of that reaction, we sort of evolved our understanding of the First Amendment into what it is now. So it both predates sort of the modern understanding of what the First Amendment protects and doesn't protect, or even how we protect our secrets. So it's an incredibly antiquated law, and it's incredibly broad. I mean, if you read it on its face, if the New York Times prints a leaked document and I call someone up on the phone and I say, oh, my goodness, did you see the New York Times today? I mean, I've technically broken the Espionage Act. I've broken the letter of the law. Of course, I don't expect any government to apply it that way. But it is such a broad law, and we've seen the scope of it continuously broaden. First, we started applying it to journalist sources, Daniel Ellsberg, Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning. And now we've moved into applying it to a journalist or a publisher, whatever you want to consider Julian Assange, someone who didn't have any duty to protect classified information. He wasn't a government employee. He wasn't a government insider. He was a journalist from an Icelandic news company, an Australian journalist at an Icelandic publication who published information with the Times and with these other papers.
Well, wait a minute, but why is going after the publisher crossing the Rubicon? Is it personal? Is it because we didn't want to go after Jeff Bezos, who now owns the Washington Post, but before that it was a Graham family? Do we not want to go after the Sulzbergers, who own the New York Times? Is this personal or is this institutional? I mean, what's going on?
It's considered a different constitutional question. So generally the courts, they've never applied this in the realm of national defense information, but generally the courts have held that journalists cannot, the First Amendment prohibits the government from publishing information that was illegally obtained so long as the journalists themselves did not illegally obtain the information. This stemmed from a case where someone was, this is awful, illegally wiretapped, and a radio program played parts of this on the air. And I find illegally wiretapping someone to be heinous. I don't know if I would have played that information on the air, but the Supreme Court pointed out that if someone else obtains the information, a journalist cannot be prosecuted for giving it out. And while Defending Rights in Dissent opposes the use of these laws against the sources, you have a sort of a different set of policy considerations, because you have someone who works for the government, who signed a non-disclosure agreement, who had training in class information, and who gives it to the government. They have a quote-unquote duty to protect the classified information, but that duty doesn't extend to the general public. It doesn't extend to the journalist. Of course, there are all kinds of constitutional issues with prosecuting the whistleblower. I'm certainly not advocating that, but traditionally, both the executive branch and the judicial branch have treated those as two legally distinct questions. And maybe that was a mistake. Maybe if we had treated them as a unified question and said, okay, no Espionage Act, we wouldn't be here right now. But this is the first time the publisher or the journalist has been indicted as opposed to just the source.
We're talking with Chip Gibbons, Policy Director for Defending Rights in Dissent, about Julian Assange. There's a big formal ask that Rashida Tlaib, the Congresswoman from Detroit, indeed operating in the fine tradition of her predecessor, John Conyers, she and the squad have asked for Julian Assange to be freed. They want the charges dropped against him. They want the extradition request dropped. Where do we go from here? I mean, what's going to happen? I mean, I'm still trying to figure out why this is so hard, particularly when we have as the backdrop these significant leaks of classified information, which corporate media really have not gone into. But when you dig into the leaks, they're really disturbing. They talk about how we spy on our allies. Now our allies are angry with us. And wait a minute, you were spying on me, although we spy on each other all the time. They were saying that, wait a minute, hold on, wait. This is how you do this? We're not secure now. We have intelligence assets now who are in peril. I mean, and only a few, when the question was asked, Chip Gibbons, who has access to this? They were like, well, it's a very limited number of people who have access. Okay. So you all have like a rough idea of who did this, but I don't see them rounding anybody up, Chip Gibbons.
So I haven't had as much time as I would like to closely study the latest round of revelations. I very much have been in the final days of seeing that letter published. I will tell you what, when I woke up yesterday, we had 4 people on the letter. We had a 2:30 deadline. At 2:30, we still only had 5 on it. At 2:36, we had 7 on it. So people on Congress do not do deadlines.
No.
Let me tell everyone that. And it is very stressful because they had that letter since February the 7th, and they waited to 2:36 on a day when it was due on 2:30 to publish it. So I've been sort of in crazy town for the last couple of months trying to work on this. But it's a good question. I mean, I think one of the sort of downsides, well, there's many downsides of overclassification, where so much information is classified, is now so many people have to have classification securities. They have to have security clearances. So you have all this information that's classified. Pretty much everyone agrees the significant chunk of it should not be. Even the government will tell you that overclassification is a huge problem. You know, I'm doing the FBI, and I get documents that are declassified, and you look at them, and you look at why they were classified in the first place, that your eyes just almost roll out your head, some of these stuff that they have. So you have this huge group of people. You also have an increase in contracting in the government. So it's not just government employees, but defense contractors, intelligence contractors who have these clearances. And post 9/11, you saw a lot of information sharing. You have everything up in internal computer servers now. So you have people who are able to who have security clearances and are able to access documents that are not part of their work, and you have a large pool of them. And when that happens, I mean, some of this information is going to make its way to the public. Now, I haven't closely studied what's come out about Ukraine. I know the Pentagon and others are really upset about it. They're saying it's endangering, our assets, our foreign policy, et cetera. And that very well could be true. And if that's the case, that's very much cause for alarm. But they say that with every single revelation, with every single leak. They said that about the Chelsea Manning WikiLeaks, revelations, and then at trial, they had to admit they couldn't find a single person who was harmed by those revelations. They claimed that about Daniel Hale, the drone whistleblower, telling us that during a 6-month period in Afghanistan, 9 out of the 10 people who were killed by our airstrikes weren't the intended target. So whatever the situation is, they're going to say it harms our national security, and that creates a really bad problem, because if you have a case where the leak actually does harm the national security, who's gonna give them the benefit of the doubt? You very much have a boy who cried wolf problem when it comes to government secrecy. So I've seen the government's claims. I haven't had time to delve deeply in them, but pretty much every article in the New York Times and elsewhere that has reported on that the government is saying these leaks are very harmful then has a 3-paragraph history of all the times they said that before and it wasn't true. So the government, through this over-secrecy, through this over-classification, through this massive national security bureaucracy that is made up not only of public employees but private contractors, have really created a problem for themselves where they have too much information that's secret, which requires people having too much access to stuff they shouldn't have access to, and then a sort of boy who cried wolf problem. And you mentioned John Conyers in Detroit, and I just have to point out that Detroit has not only given us John Conyers. Okay, Detroit has given us John Conyers, George Crockett, and Rashida Tlaib,
That's
3
right.
of our bravest Congress people in the history of this country.
That's right.
I don't know what's going on in Detroit, but they're doing very good things.
I love Rashida. I love her. I love her. I love her. I love her. I'm so glad that she's there. She is carrying on the fine tradition of John Conyers. The last 30 seconds belong to you. What can we do to help support this effort to free Julian Assange?
If this is one of your members of Congress, you should call them right now and thank them. And if your member of Congress was not on the letter, you should call them and ask them to speak up for the First Amendment. And you should make the case that every single press freedom group, from the ACLU and Amnesty International to the New York Times and The Guardian, many of which do not like Julian Assange, even a little bit, want this prosecution halted because it is an attack on the First Amendment. If Julian Assange is brought to this country, it will not just be him on trial, but the future of press freedom in this country.
It will have a chilling effect on press freedom, on what you're able to say, how you're able to say it. Watch it, everybody. Please, everybody, let's support defending rights and dissent. Defend our rights and dissent, and they our rights to defend. They defend our rights, and they defend our right to dissent, and our right to speak freely. Chip Gibbons, the best at it. Thank you so much, Chip.
Thank you.
Blessings to you. And everybody, hey, let's talk about gun violence in America. Fascinating study shows that 1 in 6 Americans have witnessed a shooting. 1 in 6 Americans. 1 in 5 Americans have been impacted by a shooting. Is it the guns? Is it us? What about social inequality? As social inequality has risen, as the gulf between rich and poor has widened, guess what? So has gun violence. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Chip, thank you so much. Let me know what I can do.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you. Yes.
You don't have to thank me for that.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, it's you, The Hill, and Politico who have covered this story, and the Political article was pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm pretty thankful that these 7 members of Congress have stuck their necks out there, and that someone is able to give them an honest hearing. I mean, it's pretty shocking situation.
You know
I'm
what?
hoping today maybe some other people will wake up, but
It's not shocking to me. You know what? But then my parents,
I know,
worked for Dr. King. I mean, it's a continuation, right? And I think we've got to be very careful.
You know how they lie in the media.
All day long.
I don't even think they always know they're lying. I think they think that, some J. Edgar Hoover type told them something, and that's their friend from the bar, and why would they... I mean, do you remember... I know you're sitting next to me. Do you remember when the AP reported that false story that a Russian missile hit Poland?
Absolutely.
And they released the process by which they made the decision to publish it, and the editor said, well, an intelligence official said this. Why would an intelligence official lie?
Could you believe that?
No. I mean, the people who said weapons of mass destruction and Gulf of Tonkin, maybe we should double check before we print verbatim what they said without any pushback. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Absolutely.
They're stenographers of the powerful. They're stenographers of the powerful.
They don't stop. They do not stop. And I think that, that's why we have to be vigilant. And, but something is happening out here, Chip, because if you look at the numbers of people who watch cable television, cable news, they're just continuing to plummet. Not drop, plummet.
I never watch cable news unless there's a big news story, like the State of the Union or something. And I'll flip through the 3 main channels, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, and see how each of them are covering it,
Did you see what happened with NPR last week? When they were called the propaganda organ for the government, they were like, oh, no, not us.
I know. I did see that, yes. It was humorous.
I said, but you are, okay? I got you. I'm not mad at you.
They're saying we're state funded, and it's like...
You were set up by the state.
I'd like to see public radio get more state funding. I think compared to some of the other things we fund, it probably would be better. But, yes, you are state funded.
I'm like, you're funded by the state. Hello? What? Okay, I'm not mad at you. Just say it. Just say it. Just say it.
I've got to run. I've still got some other loose ends to tie up from this letter.
Blessings to you.
Good to be on the program.
Always.
Yes, thank you.
We love having you on. Always. Chip Gibbons.
Coming on.
I love Chip Gibbons.
Right.
Everybody, please support Defending Rights and Dissent. They deserve our support. They need it. And they need it because they do defend our rights. And they also defend our right to dissent. That's what, when we attack whistleblowers, we attack the right to dissent. And more than that, that about which you can dissent. If you're not given the truth, if you don't really know what's going on, a lot of things are being done in our name with our money. And when we find these things out, when people found out about Vietnam, they said, oh, no, you got to stop this. Think about that, everybody. Think about it. Let's talk about the guns in the United States. Let's talk about the guns. Let's talk about the violence. Let's talk about us. You know, we're all reeling from yet another mass shooting. We've had more mass shootings than we've had days in the year. So I want to know what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts about what happened in Louisville and what's happened before that and what's surely bound to happen next? And I'm not trying to speak it into existence, but I do know that until we decide that we want peace, this is what we're going to get.
Hi, Miss Jackson.
Yes.
Hi, I have most of the guests for the next event.
Okay, who do we have?
We have attorney C.K. Hoffler, attorney Daryl Jones, Dwight McKee, and Reverend Dr. Todd Urey. I'm working on getting Aaron Connolly.
Okay, fantastic.
Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing, everybody? Let me hear you.
Good morning. Good morning, Santita.
Good morning. Good morning. Todd?
How are you?
Good. Just want to make sure that we can hear you. Okay.
2 minutes.
All right. And we're waiting for Connolly. Okay. All right. So that's who you have, CK. I'll go through some headlines and open things up and then toss some things to you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy. Whew. All right, everybody. CK, send me a text and let me know when I can call you. I was out, whenever my mother asked me to come out with her, I'm always like, oh, gosh, what's this going to be? Because it's never, I just need you to run with me for an hour. Girl, I didn't get home until like 7:30 last night. Which is why you all got texts from me so late.
It's a wonderful experience because you're creating wonderful memories.
Oh, yeah. Can I have my neck back, though? Just kidding. Dwight knows that. No one talks about Dwight like my mother does. But you know what? I don't feel sad for him, and no one should, because he loves it. He feels that shows,
I'm mad.
that demonstrates.
I'm mad that you by night, you all.
Mm-hmm. She says all kinds of things to him. And she'll say, now, Dwight, what do you think? Nuts. Nuts. But it's good to hear everybody this morning. But, my parents go, when did you meet my parents, Dwight? You were what, about 14 or 15?
Yeah, we met when they first came to Chicago.
Oh, that was 64. Yeah.
So, I was in 8th grade.
Oh, my gosh.
I wasn't born yet, Santita.
Hi, Miss Jackson.
I know.
We're about to come back in 15 seconds.
Girl, most of us weren't. Just kidding.
I haven't gotten Erin Connolly yet, but I will be working on her.
Okay, thank you so much. Honey, most people in the world weren't. Just kidding.
Like, if I wasn't born yet,
Stand by.
people in the world went. I get it.
Okay. Stand by, everybody.
Change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It's WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Wednesday, April 12th, 2023. I am Santita Jackson. I want you to meet my morning stars. We're streaming live on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Facebook reached out to me and asked me to ask all of you to get over to YouTube, to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and please subscribe, everybody. And please like and share on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Many of you go to Santita Jackson. I appreciate that, but I can't take any friends there. And in fact, they're kicking people off, literally, by the thousands all the time. And so, because there's a limit. But I don't have a limit on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. So everybody, please get on over there and encourage your friends to go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Everybody who's watching today, please like and share. Everybody, Kenneth, Angela, Nudicrous, Jewel, Flora, everybody, Andre, all of you all the way back, Linear Bob, Dave Dowling, all of you, please like and share. Hey, Carol out there on the left coast, Marquet, Laura Bell, Barbara Bacon, everybody like and share, share the show, everyone. Share it with at least one person. As we talk about gun violence, many people we're reeling from yet another mass shooting. We've had more mass shootings than we've had days in the year in the United States of America. What's going on? And what is the link between, the studies are showing, the data is in, and it's very clear. There's a link between rising social inequality and gun violence in America. Indeed, many people are feeling that the American dream of prosperity, of home ownership, of getting a job with a prosperity wage, and on and on and on, getting into school, getting educated. And as you look around the world, that is not something that people have immediate access to, but in America it's very different. It is. With all of the tough times that black and indigenous people and people of color have had, it still is a land of opportunity. It is. More so than just about any place on earth. But as those portals close on people, something is happening. That's right. Gun violence. People are killing other people. And so we need to talk about that. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. I want to know what your thoughts are about all of this. What about Louisville? And what about the larger problem of the guns? Is it the guns, or is it us, or is it some combination? Why is it that people feel that if they're having a bad day, they have the right to kill you? 773-763-9278. Let's get some of these headlines out the way. In Chicago, a high of 78 degrees and sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 84 degrees and sunny. We are in the play-in tournament phase of the NBA season. That is those teams that are able to play their way into the playoffs. Well, the Lakers, hey, they got the number 7 seed last night. That's right. They got 108-102 over the Timberwolves in overtime. 7 points. Only 7 points were scored by the Timberwolves in the last 11 minutes of the game. LeBron James, 30 points, 10 rebounds, and on and on and on. Well, congratulations to the Lakers. And the Bulls will be playing the Raptors tonight in the play-in tournament. Who's going to win? We will have to see. In the NHL, Chicago 5, the Penguins 2, the Jets 3, and the Wild 1 in a season where we saw the Bruins become the most successful team in the history of the NHL. 63 games they have won. No team has ever won as many games. Let's go to some more headlines from CNN. The city of Louisville will hold a vigil today to let community members grieve the 5 people killed this week in a bank shooting. Of course, you still have a police officer, among others, fighting for their lives. This police officer had been on the force 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks, 10 days actually, when he was shot. And of course, it was his partner, the person who was training him, who actually took out the gunman. But we need to find out more about this 25-year-old who had been fired from the job and who said that they would be killing people once they went on the job. What is going on? I disagree with not sharing the names and the backgrounds and the narratives of these shooters. I think you need to know who they are, particularly since so many of them have military training. About 2,000 people in eastern Indiana received evacuation orders Tuesday after a large fire at a recycling plant began emitting toxic smoke. The fire, which created a thick black plume over industrial buildings and a neighborhood, is expected to burn for days and is, quote, according to the Indiana State Fire Marshal Steve Jones, definitely toxic. He continued, there is a host of different chemicals that plastics give off when they're on fire, and it's concerning, and we want to make sure that we give people heads up on an evacuation. The leaked classified Pentagon documents posted to social media suggests the U.S. is pessimistic that Ukraine can quickly end the war against Russia. The documents highlight specific weaknesses in both Ukraine's weaponry and Russia's military offensive, predicting a stalemate for months to come. Those are just some of the headlines. And as we get to this topic today, of course, legal Q&A with CK, let's talk about financial freedom. You know, we want you to reach out to Team Hochberg. In fact, I'm going to have David Hochberg on in the next day or so, because I want to know how possible it is to own a home in this environment. What do you think, everybody? Are you having trouble holding on to your home? Do you want to own a home? Well, it is possible to buy a home in this environment, particularly if you've not owned a home within the past 3 years. If you're a first-time buyer, which means that you have not owned a home within the past 3 years, you need to call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. They're your trusted local lender. First-time buyers made up just 26% of home buyers last year, down from 34% the year before, and down from the year before. It keeps on going, and that's why Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac want to turn these numbers around by incentivizing you, first-time home buyers, with substantially lower rates. And you need to really grab a hold of this program while you can, because they can jack up the rates at any time. So if you live in the Chicago area, and if your total household income all adds up to $105,000, $700 a year, and that's just everybody who's working in the household, and if you have not owned a home within the past 3 years, call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-6-DAVID, to see if you qualify for these low interest rates. And please get in there, because these interest rates can be spiked high at any moment, everybody. This special offer can expire at any time. That's why you need to take advantage of this opportunity. All you have to do is give them a call, and you'll find out whether you're in or whether you're out. Call them at 855-56-DAVID or go to 56david.com, 56david.com. Find out find out if you qualify for these amazingly low rates, and then call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID. Wow, what happened in Louisville, Kentucky? Well, it seems that something that's been happening all over the country, and particularly in 2023 and 2022 and 2021 and 2020, and on and on and on and on it goes. We have a real thing with firearms deaths. Indeed, 1 in 6 Americans, get this, have witnessed a shooting. 1 in 6 Americans. Now, that's 340 million of us. That's a whole lot of people. That's like almost 57 million people have witnessed a shooting in the United States. 1 in 5 of us have been impacted directly by a shooting. That's a lot of people, everybody. That's 74 million people at least. So it's becoming, as Pastor Vicki Johnson said at the beginning of the show in the Good News segment, it's commonplace. These tragedies are commonplace. Have we normalized them? And what are the roots? Let's dig in the weeds. Let's look at the roots. Why are workplaces the most common places for this workplace violence? Why is it that once you lose a job, you have a bad day, so you decide that you're going to go in and kill somebody else? Are you serious right now? That's not mental illness. That's called entitlement. You need to call it what it is. Stop playing these games. Mentally ill people hurt themselves. They don't hurt other people. Socially sick people hurt other people, and we need to deal with that. We got a lot to talk about today, a lot to unpack. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, and you said you wanted to talk about this today on Legal Q&A with C.K., so, I've given you some stuff. Let's go with it. And, of course, you are joined by Attorney Darrell Jones, Chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, Rainbow Push, pastor of Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, and a lawyer, and, of course, brilliant social scientist Dwight McKee. And, okay, C.K., take it away.
Good morning, Santita, and to our incredible panel. Santita, I wanted to talk about this today because this is just literally plaguing this country, and we're not looking at what's in front of us. I submit a lot of people are, but I don't think as a nation we are. When we think about the Tennessee 3 that everybody's been talking about, that you covered on your show with great acuity and with impeccable vision, when we think about them, at the core of their protest was gun violence. What we saw when the country was dismayed and distraught over what happened to George Floyd, and even though he wasn't killed by a gun, he was killed by law enforcement, and we see more cases of abuse of power, abuse of discretion, excessive use of force by law enforcement in this country, and that's increasing. It's increased since George Floyd was murdered by those police officers. We saw Ahmaud Arbery being chased by 3 citizens. They weren't even law enforcement. 3 citizens. They called themselves doing a citizen's arrest under some slave law that still existed on the books in Georgia. And at the end of the day, they did have guns. They did threaten and terrorize him and kill him and shoot him and treat him like a dog, a rabid dog. So these are I'm just citing 1, 2, 3 examples of thousands of cases in this country that we know about, and thousands that go unreported, where you just find someone dead on the side of the street, unnamed person, their head is blown off, or someone is killed to gun violence. And finally we're seeing, because the gun manufacturers have had immunity for so long, but finally we're seeing some litigation emerging, challenging and suing these gun companies. And that's really, really, really important. So that's where we are today. But we have to really take a different position as it relates to these gun manufacturers and the legislators that continue to pass legislation to allow easy access to guns. In Georgia, you can have a gun in a nursery, in the hotel, in the bathroom, in church, anywhere, and everybody can know you have a gun. And I was in the grocery store, in the hairdresser, the beauty salon the other day, and a woman walked in with a gun, and it was a small space with a gun that we could all see, and I immediately felt very uneasy because we were in a small space, and she walked around like she was somebody with that gun. And for the rest of us in this small space in the beauty salon, we felt very uneasy because in Georgia, it takes nothing for you to have a gun and to use a gun. And in the states where there's a stand your ground law, it becomes even more critically important for us to be able to legislate, because people will say, I just felt threatened by that black person. She or he, they just look like a bitter black person, and they look like they were going to terrorize me. And so I just took my gun and shot them because I felt that he or she was just going to kill me because they look very threatening and big. So we are in a state of chaos, complete chaos and crisis as it relates to gun control in this country. And now we are suspending legislators who are protesting. We are taking, when I say we, now there's a movement to do that, and that's very methodical. But also remember, in states like Mississippi, there are new laws that are being passed where they're removing and taking away the power of judges, black judges, to oversee criminal cases and certain civil cases, putting them in elected judges and putting them in the hands of unelected, appointed judges by a chief judge who's a very, very conservative Republican. This is what we're seeing. So on the one hand, this is political. On the other hand, it's political just in terms of party politics. On the other hand, it has to do with allowing gun manufacturers to continue to make trillions of dollars and have people have access to weapons. And when we look at the backgrounds of some of these people who are doing these mass shootings, it's all predictable. And they're usually, by the way, put somebody on notice. And so there's so many issues, Cynthia. I think the more that we talk about it, the more people might be incentivized to start really looking at who they're voting for. What is their position on gun control? Because it's not until you're a victim. In some communities, like in the black community, as you said earlier, we know victims. We may have been victims. I've been robbed before. So many of us, and I think of the 5 or 6 people who are guests on your show today, I'm one. So I'm the 1 in 5. I've been robbed at gunpoint in this country once and in a foreign country once. So this is real. This is real. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we can encourage people to vote. We've got, he's emerging, he and Barbara Arnwine have emerged as one of the foremost activists, if you will, trailblazing, incredibly brilliant lawyers on voting rights in this country. They stand on the shoulders, of course, of your dad, Santita, and all the work that he's done, and they take it to another level because of their legal proficiency and ability to go and do some good trouble in the country. And that's, Daryl Jones, who's the chair of Transformative Justice Coalition. He connects the dots every single day with his work. So I wanted to call on him and see what he thinks about this. Daryl?
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you, CK. And, let me start by just saying, once again, our hearts go out to those victims and the families that have been just devastated by this gun violence. And CK, you could not have laid it out better. It's interesting to see the Kentucky legislators, some of them come forward and start talking about, policy needing to be passed and something needing to be done to prevent the gun violence that we see in our society and just the rise of it that we're seeing throughout the country. But it's another thing when we start electing the officials to make the policies and put the policies in place. I mean, what we must do is that we've got to focus on legislators and their positions and be certain that we're holding them them accountable, that they're putting forward the will of the people, what we want to have in place. It's nonsensical that every other day, every other week, every month, we're having the same conversation, but nothing is being done legislatively. We've got to have something done legislatively. We've got to have elected officials that have the backbone to stand up to the National Rifle Association and put in place sensible legislation to protect people. It's not just Kentucky. It's not just Tennessee. We see what's happening in Florida now with the almost no control with regards to people being able to carry weapons freely. So it's problematic. But we've got to start at the grassroots. We've got to start electing people that will, carry forward our interests. That's where it begins. That's how I see it, CK.
And, you raised so many good points, Daryl. You're in the DMV, and Reverend Dr. Lawyer Todd Urey, who's in our Rainbow family, who's an incredible lawyer as well, a minister, and who's in Baltimore and sees a lot of Baltimore is unique in so many respects. Reverend Urey, Dr. Urey, what do you see from your perspective in this whole discussion on gun violence?
Well, good morning, CK and Santita, and to all of my colleagues this morning. One, let me echo Brother Darrell's sentiments at the tragic loss of life in Louisville and in Nashville. Some of the folks that we've seen on television in Louisville over the last few days, I actually know from the days I was representing Reverend Jackson and going back and forth to Louisville after Breonna Taylor was actually killed in her home by police. That was just 3 years ago. When we talk about gun violence, we tend to use those two words to speak broadly to what is a very nuanced reality. So let's look at the distinctions. Many times in urban context, what is gun violence is interpersonal gun violence that is up close and known. What we saw in Louisville, what we saw in Nashville was kind of a blend. You had an employee who was about to be terminated, who still had access to the bank in a state where you could have open carry. It would not have been uncommon. I saw it when I was there. Folks walking up and down the street with weapons on their hips, many of them carrying actually ARs openly. So it wouldn't have been a shock. He would not have drawn any suspicion, except that he was going into the bank where there probably would have been prohibition, but he had access. So he goes in early, he carries the gun with him, he sits behind his desk, and then when the folks that he has an issue with are all in a place where they don't have the benefit of escape or the benefit of cover, he takes advantage of that and then uses the design of the building to really kind of sit in a way where he's in a position to be a sniper against officers, where he will be able to see them, they won't be able to see him. When we look at this, what we have is a little different nuance, and here's the key difference, and I think this is one that we have to look at. In Newtown, there was a settlement against Remington, one of the manufacturers of the AR-15. That settlement, I think, opens the door that, to Darrell's point, while we are voting in the election cycle, in between the election cycles, we're going to have to create the wherewithal to do actual litigation. What we've seen is litigation against the gun manufacturers. What we've not seen is litigation against the manufacturers of the ammunition. It's the ammunition that has the deadly effect and impact. So if you take an AR-15, which is a civilian variant of what is the M16 or the current version of the battlefield weapon that's issued to military all over the country, what you have is a 5.56 round. It's a 5.56 millimeter round, has a very sharp edge, does great damage, but it was designed for combat. It was not designed for a civilian purpose. To make it available for just general use is reckless, and it actually contributes to the mass casualties that we often see in some of these issues. The other issue we have is you have a Supreme Court who has basically endorsed what we're seeing in Florida, that come one, come all. If you want one, you can buy one. If you can afford it, carry it, and lets everybody go. That's kind of the trend that's fueling this out-of-control response, where folks who are under pressure, as Santita talked about early on in the intro, who are dealing with the pressures of life. Behavioral health issues, mental health issues are not always diagnosed. They could be episodic, they could be short-term, they could be responsive to an acute onset of a condition for which, if there is access to a gun and ammunition that goes with it that can do great damage, you have a scenario where you may not have mental illness to the degree that you could screen it in a background check. You may not have an issue where there is some criminal history for which you need to be able to filter. Mm-hmm. You have folks who are just wrestling with life, dealing with this. And so when we look at the landscape, I think we have to be very precise that when we talk about gun violence, where, under what circumstances, and who is actually involved.
Absolutely. Legal Q&A with CK on the Santita Jackson Show. Call us at 773-763-9278. Can't wait to hear from you, Dwight McKee, what your thoughts are. I mean, because I want us to begin to, CK, dig down into social sickness. We talk about mental sickness. Entitlement creates social sickness. These people believe that I'm having a bad day so I can kill you. You can have one too. Are you for real? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Okay, CK, begin to push, wrap things up at 8:57 your time. 7:50. Oh, you have to leave at 8:55.
I leave at 8:55.
Yeah, I do. Okay, well then let's back it up. So by 8:53, you want to be able to give some closing remarks, and then I'll close things out. Okay?
Okay.
Because you have got to be able to wrap this up.
Right, and
okay.
And the thing is, there's background noise, and that's why I have to. I'm just concerned at 8:55 if I don't. I might be a quiet place, but it's at a convention center, so I don't really trust.
Well, if it, however, we'll roll with it. Okay.
Okay. Well, then I can wrap it up. We'll roll with it. If it's really too crazy, then you'll know from the background. We can just roll with it. But I'll do everything to see it to the end. Then.
Okay.
Okay. Well, tell the DJ to hold party music till 9.
No, well, actually, we are out at 58 after the hour, so I need to have it tossed to me by 57.
By 57? Okay, mm-hmm. We'll do. Okay. So Uncle Dwight will be next, and our sister Erin Connolly will.
Is Erin here?
Wrap it up. Is she there?
Erin is not.
Oh, okay. We haven't been able to reach her, but she, to be fair, she just got in from a family vacation. Okay. Yeah. With all these children, so she was going to try and get in for you, CK, but
we'll have Uncle Dwight, Uncle B, take us to the bridge, and
with the dookie stick. I love it. Oh my goodness. You're the one who pivots off all this music. Shoot, what you talking about? Don't make me crazy, acting like something's wrong with my mind. You go back to the stylistics and the dramatics and everybody else. All the brothers with the afros and the, and the polyester suits. But they were suits. I loved it. Oh my gosh. Okay. CK, I'm going to send you, we have a caller, but of course you want Dr. D to break this all down. Okay. So I'm sending this to you right now, CK.
Okay. And then Santita, tonight, after 8 o'clock your time, 8 o'clock my time, 10 o'clock your time. If you have, we can chat in.
Oh, I will do that. So I want to take care of some things, and I need to speak with you.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Make all these. Whew. Okay, here we go.
Back in 60.
Caller's Robert, right?
I'm sorry?
Is the caller's name, you sent me information on the caller.
Yes, that's what I have. I just forwarded to you what my board operator sent to me.
Perfect. Okay. All right.
But you know, it's very interesting. No one wants to talk about the tie between social inequality and the rise in crime. And Dennis Blair, who's the head of our intelligence services, said this like 16, 17 years ago. Hey, Cheryl Hunter, how you doing? Lorraine, Paula, Flora, sending you all so much love to Dave Dowling, sending you all so much love, Carol, out there on the left coast. Everybody, please like and share, like and share. Go to YouTube, The Santita Jackson Show. Like and subscribe. Please go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page. That's where I can get my new friends, and I want you to be my friend. And let's talk about this. Call us at 773-763-WCPT.
Stand by.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, Santita Jackson Show, legal Q&A with CK as we do every Wednesday, talking with the past national president of the National Bar Association, the chair of Rainbow Push, of course, legal analyst on Court TV, host of her own show on WAOK in Atlanta, the brilliant C.K. Hoffler. 1 in 6 Americans have witnessed a shooting. 1 in 5 have been impacted by a shooting. It's someone they know who've been impacted by a shooting. And the data are showing, the studies are showing that there is a direct correlation between rising inequality and rising gun violence. We've got a lot to talk about today, CK. You got some callers, but I know you want to go to Dr. D. CK, take it away.
But we want to go to Dr. D, Uncle Dwight McKee, social scientist extraordinaire, visionary, activist, brilliant social scientist. So he can unpack this and give us the correlation, connect the dots. So, Uncle Dwight, what do you say?
Well, it's interesting because if you really look at who's doing the shooting, it defies demographics. You have everything from a DuPont, who was a billionaire, to actors, to 6-year-old children, to disgruntled employees, to bankers, to industrialists. And the people that are doing the shooting, they themselves defy any class, any caste, any race, any economic status. The fact of the matter is, this country was founded, it was birthed in violence. And violence is in the DNA of the country, and it's hard to extract. The right to bear arms is the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, right next to the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. It is inherent in the culture of the country. And the country was founded in violence. It has killed more people than any other country in the history of the world. And what you're looking at is just a residue of the culture. A culture that's grounded in violence, that resolves its issue by violence, that exists from violence, that its nature is locked into violence, and who sees violence as some see it as a means to an end, some see it as an end unto itself. But you grow up at 6 years old playing cops and robbers, shooting your little classmates. First toys you get for Christmas for boys is guns. And your infatuation and fetish for guns give you the sense of power and artificial security that is only reinforced by the TV shows you watch, by the video games you play, by the music you listen to. It's a culture that's reeking violence. And so all we do is see the residue of the culture. That's what we look at.
CK, this is a whole lot. I mean, because many people don't look at this on a cultural and spiritual level. And that's something that Dr. King did. You know, this is, he said, the bombs we drop overseas will explode at home. I mean, it's like he foresaw this, the spiritual death, spending more money on.
And he talked about guided, and he talked about guided missiles and misguided men.
So tie that to today, Dwight.
It's the same situation. Is that when Dr. King talked about steady war no more, it was revolutionary. When Jesus talks about steady war no more, it's revolutionary. In a culture that right next to freedom of religion is the freedom to bear arms. And so there is no capacity to self-regulate if you have some mental illness, some emotional illness, some spiritual deficit, some drug issue. If your issues, if you have no capacity to self-edit, then in many ways the way you express your frustration is you just go get a gun and start shooting people. And what you said was profound, Santita, is that people have a sense of entitlement and they feel like they have the right to resolve whatever their daily issues are by going out into the public square and just shooting people at will. It's a emotional, spiritual, mental deficit that we operate in, and guns become a means to an end. What makes the United States different is we have such access to so many guns. It's more guns than people. And so there's always a gun that you have access to that you then can carry your frustrations out with. In other countries, they don't have such direct access to guns, even if they have those emotional issues.
Well, you know, I mean, CK, that's why I just kept bringing that up, because I keep, you know, because even in casual conversation, I've heard some people say, well, you know, they were having a bad day, you know, they lost their job, and it's like there was an understanding of why these jokers go out and kill people. I said, no, they're not mentally ill. No, and it might be episodic. I'm with you, Todd, but guess what? No, entitlement messes you up in the head and in the heart. You just think you have the right to go in and CK and just kill somebody because I'm having a bad day? I mean, huh?
Well, then that would mean, you know, everybody has a bad day.
Yeah.
So we would all, and that's probably why things are as crazy as they are. But this is the thing, Santita, until we have legislators, I'm going back to the point I made in that Daryl Jones brought home, until we have legislators and people who are elected who have the courage to go up against the gun manufacturers, to put in place laws that don't make guns, assault rifles, so easily accessible. And granted, you're going to have streets. You know, you'll always be able to access things on the street, but you got to start somewhere. And until that happens, then this is just going to get worse and worse and worse, because we are in our country right now is so divided on so many levels. We are in crisis, whether it's from a woman's reproductive standpoint, whether it's from a civil rights standpoint, whether it's from a voting rights standpoint, whether it relates to election laws, whether it relates to just privacy rights. We are in crisis in this country. So people are going to have a bad day. And some say we're knee deep in a recession. But people are going to have a bad day. So if the solution is to take out your frustrations and having a bad day, getting fired on the job, by just actually going in your car and getting that assault weapon that you got legally in your state and killing a few people and then saying, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, or then killing yourself, then we're going to have anarchy. And it appears that some believe, and I'm concerned, that we might be headed in that direction. And unless we have, and the irony is, the Tennessee Three, they were legislators that were trying to do the right thing. And two of them were suspended. And we had to have really almost a movement for them to get reinstated. But this fight is not over. The fight is not over in Tennessee for the Tennessee Three by a long shot, because as long as you've got these conservative legislatures, nominated legislatures that can pass whatever laws they want to pass and do whatever they want to do and ensure that there is no gun control, it's going to continue to get worse.
Well, CK, you've got some callers.
Let's hear from Robert. I think Robert is holding. We'd love to hear from Robert. Is Robert still on the line?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Hey, Robert.
Thanks for taking my call. I think this is a really interesting conversation, and I think the two comments that were made previously about that Dwight made about our history, I think is extremely informative. And I think what the other contributor, gentleman, commented about how nuanced it is. And what I mean by what I think that's interesting is I did a little research last night and found out that so far this year there's slightly over 11,000 deaths from guns. And they broke it down a little bit. And 67% were suicide. And I think what's going on in this conversation is that people don't want to look at, well, why are people committing suicide? What are the economic or what are the emotional issues that are causing that? And I think that that's extremely important, because if you start to whittle away sort of the traditional, let's say, homicides, like where people, they're intimate, maybe somebody gets fired from a job or something like that, I think that's going to be quite a few of these. And I'm not saying that that's okay. I think what's more important to look at are those things that I believe are a product of our political discourse. And I don't believe that legislation will touch that. And to draw on an analogy, we criminalized marijuana as equivalent to heroin, and that created a black market. And you could get marijuana anywhere you wanted to. I'll assure you, if legislators outlawed an AR-15, a black market will be created, because the underlying political dynamic and tension are not ever being discussed. We struggle to recognize that there's fascism in this country, and it's present within the major political party of the GOP. Until we can change the language of how we talk about everything, we're never going to deal with this type of violence and how it's being used to basically achieve political goals through intimidation and terror. And I think that's what people got to do: change the language, identify what's really going on here. You know, we're outraged about 4 people being killed, but we don't get outraged about how many people die because they don't have health care. So that's what I'm saying about the language. We kind of blame an inanimate object rather than the people, than the people we are. And what we're doing and what we refuse to deal with and admit is our history of violence through colonization, genocide, enslavement. And really, if you look at it, the only people that that's not happening to are white men. And it's time we start realizing that we live in a patriarchal society that encourages violence, that meted out by white male society. And when we can rise to that level and start honestly talking about it, we'll start dealing with this. We'll get these people that are just depressed and they don't know what else to do, and they just get a gun and they go kill people. But we've got to change the way we talk about it. White people have got to change it. A lot of other people already understand this. White people are they're the ones that are not getting it and not admitting what's really going on here. So that was my comment.
Why do you think white people, why do you say that, why have you focused on white people?
Because, I follow some of these, social media groups, and anytime you hear of violence, it's like anything that happens in the city of Chicago, it's code. If I have a conversation with a white person, they immediately start talking about gangbangers and all this. And I go, you've never met a gangbanger in your entire life. You don't know anything about these people. I said, you don't know anything about the experiences they've had, the kind of, desperation that poor people and non-white people live in. And I said, they'll do that automatically. They just remain blind to anything. I've challenged people. I said, you want to see what's like in the inner city? I said, let's go down to the Cook County Detention Center and let you meet some people. I was on a poetry writing little workshop. I went there. I said, meet somebody that got arrested, sat in jail for 8 months, just because they were in a car with somebody that had some weed, and that totally destroyed their life. I said, that's what's going on. Is we don't want to deal with that, so then we're confused when they're desperate and they maybe go rob somebody. We're so surprised. We're saying that's all gun violence. No, it's not gun violence. It's social violence. That person is being socially terrorized because they can't get food, they can't get housing, they can't get education, they can't get anything they see other people getting in society. And white people will not talk about this. They will not talk about what poverty is, what the history of enslavement is, what the history of colonization did to this society and the people in it.
You said a whole lot.
I'm in a progressive book club, and when I kind of say these things, I mean, there's a lot of people that really get it. There's some people they're like deer in the headlights. Like they can't believe that I'm saying this stuff, and it's like, go out there. Go out there and maybe talk to that homeless guy. You're going to find out, holy cow, that's what happened? That's how you got here? They won't. A lot of white people will not talk to anybody other than their little circle that they know, that they're comfortable with. And you got to get uncomfortable. You got to get around other people. You're going to find out they're not going to kill you. They're not zombies. They're not going to do it. They're just normal people. They're going and doing their gig, and it's like we just got to. That's it.
Robert,
I think it's.
No, honey, you've given us a lot to think about. We got a couple of other callers, but I want you to call us back because you sound like James Baldwin this morning. I tell you what, that's fine company to be in.
Yeah, well, Robert, you got the best show on radio.
Oh, you're so sweet. You make it great. Bless your heart. CK, got a couple of callers you want to get in before we get out of here?
Absolutely. Paul, I know that Paul's been holding for a while from Seattle.
Ooh.
Good morning.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
Well, I think that we have been brainwashed, hornswoggled by the far-right political factions, and I'm sorry to say the courts, as of late, to believing that that people have some inherent right to be the instant purveyors of death, and that there is a line in the Constitution, a single sentence, that guarantees this inherent right. And it has been so misinterpreted and so twisted because we also have the gun industry, an industry that is unregulated. As we talked about, CK talked about it, we have a federal law, the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, which was passed, by the way, only in 2005. This was right on the heels of the expiration of the assault weapons ban. This was not an accident. The assault weapons ban expired in September of 2004, and in January of 2005, the beginning of George W. Bush's second term, with a full Republican-dominated Congress, passed this law that let one industry be exempt of strict product liability. Every other product in this country that's sold in this country is subject to strict product liability. DK knows that. Every lawyer knows that. I don't care what it is, from baby toys to pizza to anything. That anybody who sells anything must internalize the cost of the damage of their product. The gun industry doesn't have to do that. We protect them. Isn't it interesting that we think that an industry needs protection? Why do you need protection? Because you're about to go embark on selling this instrument of instant death that we've been convinced is necessary, that people have an inherent right. We don't have any inherent rights. And I would suggest this. When you read the Constitution, and here's how it's been twisted, and this is the question you have to ask, is people only read the last two clauses. They think that the Constitution says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. No. There's two clauses in the before that. And in 2008, Antonin Scalia in Heller versus D.C. said, well, the well-regulated militia clause isn't relevant anymore. So what he threw out, along with a well-regulated militia, is the word well-regulated. And then the second clause, the predominant clause, is this: being necessary to, and here's the point, the security of a free state. Now, does anybody think that there's anything else that could threaten the security of any state, any of the several states, or the federal government, for that matter, that we would tolerate other than these guns? No, it is threatening the proliferation of guns in the hands of individuals, and you're absolutely right, Santita. It's not mental illness. Mentally ill people are generally not dangerous, and they're certainly not dangerous without a gun. Neither is it evil. That's another thing that somebody said, we can't legislate evil. I'm sorry, we're not on that plane. This is not about evil. It's not about mental illness. It's about bad things that people do because they're upset and they have the instrument of death, because we have provided all of the legislation necessary to inform this as if there's this inherent right. But the reason the security of the free state is the predominant clause is because there's nothing. Every book, virtually every book on the Constitution explains that the Constitution is not about inherent rights. It's about the primary political power structures, how they work, how they can be used, what the scope of their power is, and the primary political power structures are the three branches of the federal government and the state. That second clause refers to the security of a free state, and the proliferation of guns have now become a stochastic threat to the security of all of the states, and therefore is becoming the threat to the security of the Union itself. And therefore, this idea that the Second Amendment is this one inherent right that cannot be infringed is absolute nonsense, because it instates this insane nihilistic notion that death can occur at any time, and that you can have a gun on your hip and at your workplace. And you ask, why the workplace? Essentially, people kill the people they know.
Paul, I want you to stay right there. Paul, stay right there. We have a hard out, because we're on in more than one city, and I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear Dwight and Reverend Dr. Yuri Esquire, who's I'm sure running to court, as is I'm sure Daryl Jones and Attorney C.K. Hoffler. C.K., I've got about a minute for you to kind of put a bow on what you've been hearing today, because people are very engaged in this topic, and it's interesting. They're looking at it not just legally, but they're looking at the cultural sickness in the country that's driving so much of this. Attorney C.K. Hoffler.
Absolutely, Santita. Well, I think what we're hearing is people are frustrated, people are upset, people are angry, and people want to find solutions. There's a connection with the social dynamics in this country and the escalation of gun violence, without a question. But there's also a connection with the unfettered discretion of the gun manufacturers to continue to produce without really feeling the impact of it in their pocket. Mm-hmm. And so until I believe there has to be a legislative move across the country to make sure there's change. There's a correlation between voting and who you elect into office. So I think what we're hearing today is a ray of hope, because there's always hope. But we have to, if we want to curb this violence, we have to be very, very aggressive in our communities, and we have to be very aggressive from a legislative standpoint and from a legal standpoint in terms of court challenges.
When will you be on Court TV again?
I'll be on Court TV next Monday.
Okay.
I won't be on until...
Okay, well, this is giving you a bit of a break, but you're on the road, too. Hey, everybody, stay here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. We're going to get some closing thoughts from Paul and Dwight and Reverend Dr. Yuri and Attorney Daryl Jones, and want to hear what your thoughts are. And I think we have one more caller, but I want you all to stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And of course, on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow, God willing. Hey, Abraham down there in Venezuela. Mwah. Sending you much love. See you tomorrow.
Hey, Santita?
Yes.
I'm going to have to run.
Okay.
I'm running into a meeting. Okay.
Thank you so much. Paul, I wanted you to be able to conclude your remarks. I mean, because you and Robert have said a whole lot.
Well, yeah, I think that, again, we've been brainwashed. The right to bear arms is not guaranteed by the Constitution. Neither is it dependent upon that instrument for its existence. Those are not my words. Those are the words of Chief Justice Morrison R. Waite, the 8th Chief Justice of the United States, in a landmark case in which that was the case of United States versus Cruikshank, wherein 280 freed black men were massacred in the Colfax courthouse in Louisiana on Easter Sunday, 1873, as they were trying to hold the courthouse for they were occupying the courthouse so that the former slave owners wouldn't take over. They lost the election. The Democrats lost the election, the Democrats being the party of slavery in those days. Chief Justice Waite was not a liberal. So the idea that we all have this now individual right to carry death on our hip is absolutely, it's insane and it's nihilistic. And that's what the political powers have convinced the people, that you have a right, and the courts have become a danger. The courts have now, because they have been swayed by an extremist political party. It's not just on guns. The courts have become a danger in other decisions that I won't get into right now. But
this is the most business-friendly Supreme Court in the history, since they have been examining the bents of these courts. This is the most business-friendly, the most corporatist court that we've ever had in our history. So that's something, we got to think about that.
And I would dare say, I don't know about the most corrupt court, but
no, they said it's the most business-friendly. The most business-friendly. I was very, very careful in saying that, because that's what, the study and the articles have shown. The articles took me to the studies, and they said this is our Supreme Court now, which has no code of ethics, which governs their behavior. They have the most business-friendly, the most business-arced court in our history, since they have been really measuring these things. So, something to think about.
And that's saying something, because the court in the 20s, the William Howard Taft Court, was pretty business-friendly. This
is more than that. This is more business-friendly than that one. How do you like them apples?
I believe it.
We're living with it every day. But you know what, Paul, because I know I'm going to have to wrap things up, because I'm going to have to go. But I want you to stay right here as I get some closing thoughts from everyone. Attorney Jones, are you still there?
I am, Santita. Thank you. And, it's been just a fascinating conversation that we've had today. But let me tell you, we have got to focus. And, one of the callers made the point that, we cannot legislate our way out of this. Mm-hmm. But, what we need to understand and appreciate is that it's a multifaceted approach. Legislation will be one of the ways of stopping some of the gun violence. But, also, as CK had pointed out, litigation will be another way. And there'll be a multitude of approaches that will be necessary for us to be able to stop having these calls where we have to stop expressing our condolences to people that are being killed from senseless gun violence. So I think it's a multitask approach that must be taken. And, and until we put in place those pieces, that we have the elected judges that are making decisions with regards to the court cases that come before them, and we have the elected legislators that are putting in place the legislation to try to slow and stop a lot of the senseless gun violence, we're going to continue to have this conversation. But we as a people have got to raise up, and we've got to always remember that, we are the employers. We are the ones who hire the elected officials that put in place the legislation. They don't hire us. So we've got to put the onus on ourselves to put the people in place, to put the legislation in place, to put the judges in place so that we can have the society that we desire to have, Cynthia.
Reverend Dr. Yuri, your closing thoughts?
Well, first, Santita, you are correct. I am on the way out the door to court.
I thought you were.
For fourth trial in 5 weeks. But, welcome to post-COVID reality. Charles Hamilton Houston's famous statement that is ingrained in the minds of aspiring would-be attorneys, it lingers with us. You're either a social engineer or a social parasite. And so the engineering process requires multiple components. We need litigation and legislation. We need demonstration and agitation. All of those things must work together in order to produce the outcomes that lead to a more just society. Culture is not fixed. Culture is formed. And if culture is to change, it must be changed by the effort and the intent of the people. And so here's where the engagement comes in. We've got to have resources to be able to leverage the principles of law to the point about products liability, to raise that as an issue. Remington settled that Newtown case for a reason. They didn't want to create a public record, and they didn't want to establish a new principle of law. But I think there's something to be learned from that case in terms of what was in the record up until the time it settled. We've got to look at the fact that it's not just who elects the judges, who elects the governors that appoint the judges for their vacancies before the next election. Appointments is often the most efficient way to guarantee the ongoing presence of judges on the bench, because most of us, when it comes down to election time, don't know enough about the judges to determine one way or the other whether they should be retained or not. And so we've got to be more informed. That has to be by the will of the people and the willingness of the people to be informed about the issues that matter. And so part of this is recognizing that Dr. King did talk about three great evils. I heard the comment about it's not evil. I think we have to put evil in context. Dr. King talked about three great evils: militarism, poverty, racism. Those three are still at play. Those three still persist. Those three inform this conversation and everything that flows from it or flows into it. And those three still become and remain the most pressing issues that are facing the culture. And as long as the culture ignores it, it then atrophies, because it has now created a permissiveness around these principles, so that when we see these things coming out of Tennessee, when we see the open carry laws, many of them in southern states with Republican supermajorities in legislatures and Republican governors, when we see these kinds of things emerging in a Supreme Court that is either a co-conspirator in the movement or indifferent in other instances, we've got to make sure that we're on the right side of Charles Hamilton Houston's assessment. We've got to be social engineers in this moment, and we've got to be intentional about what we're building.
Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri, so brilliant, you and Attorney Darrell Jones. Dwight McKee, you want to wrap things up for us?
Yeah, the issue is not so much as the right to bear arms, is our need to feel. I feel that we have the need to bear arms. Is that, and again, and that's why I always talk about the culture, is you have in our society this approach that violence is the first point of resolution, and so it becomes a means to an end for any issue that we feel unresolved, and it's deep seated. It's Dr. King talks something being deep seated in the American dream. It is really part of the American dream to have, quote unquote, the right to defend yourself, the right to avenge yourself, the right to impose your will, the right to protect yourself. I mean, it is part of the American way. The Bible talks about that you have to really study war no more, which means that war is something that is studied, something that is ingrained, something that is analyzed and locked into, again, the DNA of the culture. And so in order to get out of it, you have to learn how to study peace, learn how to study resolving issues a different way, learn how to turn the other cheek. Those things that Jesus put on the table to say if violence is learned, then it has to be unlearned, and peace has to be learned. And that's why Jesus said, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So you just have to learn to live a different way. You have to learn to live without the sword, so you don't die with the sword.
In your heart, in your back, in your chest. Think about that, everybody. Think about it. Think about it. We have far more control than we know. And we have to look at mental illness, of course, but you must look at the social illnesses that make you sick. Feeling entitled makes you sick. And you can't take a pill and medicate your way out of that. That's a spiritual rejuvenation that you need. And that is what America needs it. I mean, we need that. And we've got to choose this day who we will serve. Choose this day. The Bible tells you that. Yeah, and you know,
you
y'all.
have to be born again.
Born again. Think differently,
you have
huh?
to be born again.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be born again. You have to be born again. You have to have a whole new way of thinking.
Whole new way of
things
thinking.
have to pass away.
Amen. Amen. We're the ones who have to do that. We're the ones. You know, as Grandmaster Flash in the Furious 5 said, you're the one that's number one. Boom. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-da. Think about that. you and the crew. Hold it. Come on. Got to make some decisions about who we are and who we really, really not want to be, but who we need to be. Right now we're being who we want to be, and that is not working, everybody. Dwight, I thank you for all of your brilliance, your insight, your eyesight, all of it. I just thank you for holding class and holding court with us as often as you do. We do need context for the times in which we live and for who we are. We all need that, everybody. I love you, Robert. Actually, I feel quite rested. I've been looking down because I've been trying to, I'm trying to keep the show going. I'm reading stuff, looking at things, but I want to thank you all so much for being with us today. I love you, everybody. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. Please take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful day. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow, Lord willing, on the Santita Jackson Show. Hey, everybody. The Rainbow Push Convention is July 15th through the 19th. Thank you, Effie. Please go on to rainbowpush.org. Get registered. It's going to be a great convention. It will be great because of you. We'll be talking about topics just like this, and just like these that we talk about every day. So, sending you much love, everybody. Please, 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 please get registered with the convention. All right? I love you, everybody. Can't wait to see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Thanks. God bless. Thank you, Dwight and Daryl and Reverend Dr. Yuri. I think they're all gone now.